Imagine hearing gunshots echoing through your neighborhood at night. So loud, so relentless, that one woman panicked and called 911, convinced someone had set up an illegal gun range right behind her home. But what she didn't know was that her big discovery would backfire in the most embarrassing way possible. Stick around to hear how this call turned into a shocking twist. And before we dive in, don't forget to subscribe so you never miss more unbelievable stories like this one. The story begins with flashing red and blue lights piercing the quiet of an ordinary suburban evening. Houses sat in neat little rows, porches glowing softly with warm lamps, and crickets chirping faintly in the background. It should have been a peaceful night, the kind neighbors spent sipping tea or watching late-night TV. But instead, the calm was shattered by a woman's frantic call to 911. Woman, your classic Karen, had picked up the phone, her voice sharp and trembling with self-importance. She was convinced chaos was erupting right behind her backyard. She didn't hear order, she didn't hear discipline. What she claimed to hear was sheer danger. Someone is recklessly firing weapons. She snapped into the receiver, her words clipped and urgent. They've turned this place into some kind of gun range. It's dangerous, it's loud, and someone needs to stop it immediately. The 911 operator tried to calm her, asking questions, trying to pinpoint the location. But Karen's voice carried that edge of entitlement, the kind that makes every operator pause for a second. She wasn't just reporting an incident, she was demanding action. She wanted flashing lights, sirens, and authority to swoop in and shut down what she believed was a crime unfolding in her very neighborhood. Within minutes, her wish came true. Patrol cars tore down the quiet streets, their lights painting the neighborhood in streaks of red and blue. Neighbors peeked out through blinds and curtains, murmuring among themselves. Something big must have been happening, they thought. After all, why else would so many police vehicles swarm into their calm little community? Karen stood proudly on her porch, arms crossed, wearing the expression of someone who believed she had just saved the neighborhood from disaster. She pointed dramatically toward the faint echo of gunfire drifting across the air. See? Do you hear that? I told you. Someone's running a firing squad out here, she declared, loud enough for nearby neighbors to overhear. The officers, though professional, exchanged quick glances with each other. They knew those sounds. They weren't reckless. They weren't random. And they certainly weren't illegal. But protocol demanded they investigate. So they turned their cruisers toward the source of the noise. That as the convoy moved off, Karen's smirk deepened. In her mind, she had just exposed the crime of the century. She imagined the police thanking her, maybe even praising her as the sharp-eyed neighbor who kept the community safe. She stood taller, reveling in the moment. What Karen didn't realize was that the so-called gun range wasn't some backyard stunt at all. Just 1 block away stood tall fences and large, official signage she had somehow ignored for years. This wasn't chaos. This wasn't criminal. It was an official police training facility where officers practiced drills under strict supervision. But to Karen, who lived for drama and thrived on confrontation, that detail didn't matter. She had made the call. She had brought the flashing lights. And she was certain that by the end of the night, the entire neighborhood would know her as the hero who stopped a gun range. Little did she know, her evening of glory was about to backfire in the most embarrassing way possible. Responding units arrived within minutes, tires crunching against the pavement as sirens cut through the night air. The once quiet neighborhood now pulsed with urgency. Neighbors peeked through curtains and cracked open doors, their faces glowing under the flashes of red and blue. To them, it looked like something serious was unfolding. And at the center of it all stood Karen. She planted herself firmly on her porch like a self-declared commander, arms crossed tightly, chin lifted with authority. Her eyes burned with smug satisfaction as she dramatically pointed in the direction of the distant cracks of gunfire echoing through the air. See? I told you, she shouted, her voice dripping with triumph. Somebody's got a firing squad out here. I knew it. You all thought I was exaggerating, but I was right all along. Her words rang out like a victory speech, loud enough for half the street to hear. The officers glanced at each other, exchanging subtle, knowing looks. They weren't alarmed. They weren't fooled. They had heard these sounds countless times before. It wasn't chaos. It wasn't illegal. It was the distinct, disciplined rhythm of supervised training exercises. Every shot had purpose. Every sound carried control. But still, procedure demanded they treat the call seriously. Without breaking professionalism, they nodded to Karen, offering little more than a polite acknowledgement. Then, with their lights still flashing across fences and rooftops, they drove toward the reported site. Their movements were calm, measured, far from the frantic response Karen had hoped for. But in her mind, none of that mattered. Watching the squad cars roll away, she could already picture her neighbors thanking her, perhaps even applauding her vigilance. Tonight, she thought, she was about to be crowned the hero who saved the neighborhood from a dangerous gun range. Little did she know, her so-called victory was about to unravel spectacularly as the squad cars rolled through the gates. The truth became impossible to deny. Floodlights illuminated the area, revealing a line of uniformed police officers in full gear, their postures sharp and disciplined. Each shot fired rang out with precision, followed by the crisp crack of bullets tearing into paper targets lined neatly along the range. Nothing about it was chaotic. Nothing about it was unsafe. It was structure, training, and order in its purest form. A massive sign stood at the entrance. Bold letters impossible to miss. Official law enforcement training grounds. Authorized personnel only. But Karen, fueled by her indignation, either ignored it or refused to believe her eyes. Without hesitation, she stormed forward, her voice cutting over the sound of practice fire. "You can't just set up a gun range in our neighborhood. This is illegal," she barked, hands waving for emphasis as if she were scolding children caught misbehaving. One officer finally turned, calm and steady. His tone was firm but polite as he addressed her. "Ma'am, this is a police training facility. Everything you're hearing and seeing is fully sanctioned, regulated, and completely safe." The explanation left Karen momentarily stunned, but only for a heartbeat. The realization hit her like a brick wall, but instead of backing down, Karen doubled down. She tried to argue about noise pollution, disturbance, and even claimed her rights were being violated. But her words began to falter as neighbors gathered, whispering and chuckling at her dramatic outburst. The very officers she had called on were now politely holding back laughter. One even joked under his breath, "Guess she just tried to call the cops." On the cops, that line spread among the crowd, and within moments, phones were out, recording the entire meltdown. Karen had gone from self-appointed protector of the neighborhood to the punchline of the night. Eventually, the officers wrapped up their check and kindly told Karen to return home. There was no crime, no emergency, and no illegal gun range. Just a training ground doing exactly what it was built for, preparing law enforcement to protect the community. Karen, red-faced and fuming, stormed back into her house, slamming the door behind her. But the damage was done. The story spread across social media. Woman calls 911 on police. Didn't know she was complaining about their own facility. It became a neighborhood legend, a reminder of how quick assumptions can make someone look foolish. The moral? Sometimes the biggest noise doesn't come from gunfire. It comes from the echo of someone realizing they were completely, hilariously wrong. And that's how one phone call turned into a neighborhood legend. Karen trying to call the cops on the cops themselves. Sometimes the biggest noise isn't the gunfire, it's the embarrassment that follows. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like this video, drop a comment, and share it with your friends. And of course, make sure to subscribe to this channel so you never miss more stories just like this one.